In September 2010, 7 collections assistants joined the Minnesota Historical Society, charged with increasing online access to the Society's collections. In the months since, we have updated catalog records for and taken photographs of three-dimensional objects, scanned government records, cataloged and photographed fine art, and created content for new and existing components of the Society's webpage. My name is Ben Gessner, and I work with the art collection. I do a lot of processing new acquisitions to get them ready to be put on CMS Online, and also have been working on a few projects that involve found in collection objects and backlog projects.
I'm Christopher Welter, and I work for the Collections and Reference Department at the Minnesota Historical Society. The project that I'm involved with has to do with scanning of manuscript and government records collections. This project is specifically geared towards digitizing those collections. One of the aspects of digitizing this material is to expand the possibilities of access to the material. You can be anywhere looking for this at any time, and not only are you aware of it, but you can actually see the material for yourself. One of the priorities in coming up with our scanning list pertains to MHS's primary audiences, one of which is K-12 students. The Collections and Reference Department maintains history topics pages through its website, and on there are specific pointers to secondary resources and primary resources. So in our case, we've been looking at identifying collections that pertain to history topics that have that kind of research value and potential.
I'm Sandra Ryerson, and I work with the three-dimensional objects. I update the records in our collections management system, and I take photographs to be uploaded to the internet. I have worked on a variety of projects, including crime and punishment, the Civil War, police gear. This project included restraints, parking tickets, locks, keys, and some firearms. The sampling of guns in the crime and punishment group led to a project dedicated to the firearms in the collection. So some of my projects are categorical, so when I start something like firearms, I search the database for every object related to the project, and then I create my list. The original list for firearms included over 600 objects, so when I started actually updating the records, I sorted them by location to make the process more efficient. That way I could go through a cabinet shelf by shelf instead of going back and forth between locations. My projects have been referred to as my arsenal of weapons and torture devices, so apparently I'm making a name for myself.
I'm Strom, and I'm a collections assistant, and I photograph objects and update descriptions, and I also worked on a project to update the Minnesota Authors Biographies website. I started out in this position working with the Winter Carnival collection, the buttons and the badges, and then I worked with Munsingware. My main project, what I've worked on most since I've been here, I started in mid-November working on updating and revising and adding content to the Historical Society's Minnesota Authors Biographies website. So this project just brings in objects from the 3D collections and also from publications and photographs, and brings all that content together onto the author biographies pages. And this all increases access and awareness of the collections.
I'm Tony Crochell. I'm one of the collections assistants that were hired. I work with the 3D objects. I guess I would say that I do most of the meat and potatoes type stuff with the collections as far as the specific projects go. Well, generally the way the process works for me is that one of the curators will assign a project. Usually it runs from anywhere between 50 up to 400 to 500 different objects in a project. And my job would be to go find those objects, update the CMS system with the proper information, and then assign imaging, which would either be myself taking a photograph of the image or assigned to Jason, who would do the same thing.
I'm Jason Ownerheim, and I'm the primary photographer. One of the most difficult things about being a photographer in a museum is shooting things like this cup from the Fort Snelling Polo Grounds. It was very reflective and difficult to shoot, but luckily I got some good shots. Also, a difficult thing is shooting extremely large paintings, like this Fournier painting, which is actually 14 feet long. It took 4 of us to move it and photograph it, but I think we got some good images.
Hi, I'm Adam Harris. I'm a collections assistant. In addition to the general collections assistant duties, I also work on the Collections Up Close podcast and blog. The Collections Up Close website is a blog that has existed for a couple years now. It highlights objects and new acquisitions. Since I started back in September, we've implemented a new category, the item of the day, where we post a new item each day, each weekday. I pretty much work in collaboration with the other CAs. They come to me with objects that they see during the course of their day that they think are interesting, would make good object of the day items.
One of the item of the days came from when I worked on the Garrison Keillor biography, the Guy Noir bobblehead.
In addition to the item of the day, I've also been helping with the podcasts, the video projects that we do. And these also are things that the curators generally come up with, but we're also occasionally accepting ideas from other collections assistants. For example, back in November, we did an Armistice Day Blizzard podcast that one of the other CAs, Tony, came up with the idea for, and we recorded some audio and threw together some pictures, and it ended up being tremendously popular.
I can't recall exactly where the idea came from. It was pretty quick to put together, and that was the whole idea. I think we, at that time, were talking about something that we could put together in a hurry, and it just happened to coincide with the first major snowfall of the season at that time, too.
While working on Crime and Punishment, I came across objects owned by one of the first female police sergeants in the city of St. Paul, and I found her story compelling enough to write a podcast, which in the first month it was online was viewed over 140 times.
I recently posted our favorite things blog post on Minnesota Breweriana.
One of the byproducts of all of this, creating better access to the collections is that there's an interpretive aspect to our job. I did get a chance to, once I cataloged 200 prints, etchings, and dry points by George Ressler, put together a slideshow that was featured online as part of the Collections Up Close blog, and then got to do an actual exhibit up in the library lobby.
At this point, we have created approximately 2,100 unique digital scans from 9 different collections of those approximately 200 collections.
As you can see from my graphic, I've shot 1,709 photographs.
Since I started back in September, the blog has received over 45,000 hits, which works out to an average of about 8,200 per month, which means we're getting an average of around 400 hits per day.
In total, the author biographies displays more than 20 3D objects from the collections, several manuscript items, a map, more than 200 publications, which I scanned the covers of, and more than 20 photos from the collections.
I've updated nearly 300 firearm records, including muskets, rifles, sawed-off shotguns, revolvers, pistols, and derringers.
I tend to just plug away at the basics of what we're doing in our position and try to get the numbers up there.
We have made considerable progress, and results are even now apparent through new finding aids, podcasts, blog posts, and online catalog records. Through our various projects, the collections assistants have shared thousands of items from the Society's collections with the people of Minnesota.